On June 1st, 2023, Cephalofair Games announced that it will release a second edition of Gloomhaven in 2024, with many of the components in the game being changed or updated in some manner, whether through the use of new art, or rebalanced statistics or characteristics, or changes to cards, or updates to scenarios to have new fiction and storylines in them so that they don't play out exactly the same. There's all sorts of changes being made. We'll see the extent of those changes when they launch their crowdfunding campaign on June 20th, 2023. They'll detail that, I'm sure, to let people know what is different in this new second edition. And the announcement brought out a range of reactions from people from indifference to people who don't care about Gloomhaven or, of course, don't know it exists. That's most of the world. Most of the world, their reaction was, what? You have excitement from people who have played Jaws of the Lion or Frosthaven. Gloomhaven came out in 2017, 6 years ago at this point. That's a long time, and people have discovered the Haven system along the way, maybe playing someone else's copy for a scenario or two, or again, Jaws of the Lion, Frosthaven, they jumped in at that point, but they have not played the original, and now there'll be an updated edition to take into account just getting better at your job over multiple years, taking what you've learned, releasing Jaws of the Lion, Frosthaven, and then going back and applying it to that earlier release. There's also anger. People upset that a new edition is coming out, and if they want that, they have to buy the entire game because Cephalofair Games has said it will not release an upgrade kit to go take your first edition Gloomhaven and make it into the second edition Gloomhaven due to the extent of changes in components. If you are selling all the new cards that are needed and the new characters and the scenario, all this sort of stuff, at that point, you're kind of giving them the game. So you can buy the second edition. If you want all the updates, get the second edition. Not necessary, of course, but it's an option for you. But we're not doing an upgrade kit. So, there's so many of these announcements in the game industry because, of course, there's a wealth of older designs that have gone out of print or were never available in a particular market, and now someone wants the license to put it back on the market and make it available again to people who may have heard about a game, or to be a new game to people who have never heard of it before. At that point, it's just a new game coming out. Or you have designers where a game has gone out of print, they get the rights back, they sell it to someone else, or they change it a bit, package it a new way, and put it out again by licensing it to a publisher. You've got all these reissues and reprints that are coming out in the market. They sort of fall into four buckets, I feel. Looking at all the things that have come out that I've written about just in the past quarter, the past 3 months, so many announcements. I think they fall into four buckets. First, you have the straight reprint, a game that is coming out exactly the same as before, such as Ares Games, which is releasing The Rich and the Good. It's a game by Carlo Rossi, came out in 2009 under the name Haben Gut. It was only a German release, I think, never came out in English, and Ares is doing it exactly the same as it was before, even down to the Michael Menzel art. From 2009, Menzel's got to have good files. It's got everything stored away. Sure, sign a contract with Ares, it'll come out and look just like it did in the old days. So if you missed it before, you wanted a copy, now it's available again, exactly the same. You have Potato Man. It's a trick-taking game from early 2010s, from Zoc, Gunther Burkhardt, I believe. It's been out of print for a while. There's a US company bringing it out. It's got new artwork, but same gameplay. There's no changes to it. So you could go ahead and buy the old one and buy the new one. It's the same thing. There's no real difference. There's nothing to upset people. There's only the upside of a game that wasn't available now being available again. You have category 2. Those are the rethemings, where you take an older game, give it a new look. You have Bonanza Dahlias that was announced by Amigo, the US version of branch of Amigo. It's the Bonanza gameplay, but now with flowers, illustrated by Beth Sobel. Both versions of the game will exist on the market. If you didn't care for the beans, you like dahlias, here you go. Here's a new game for you. If you like the beans, that's still available. You can get one or the other. All is good. You have Pollen, a retheming of Reiner Knizia's Samurai the Card Game, which came out, again, more than a decade ago. It's been long out of print. The theming on Samurai the Card Game was sort of non-existent when you looked at the components. It was just barely illustrated cards. Now it's got flowers and bees on tiles. Again, art by Beth Sobel, looking nice. And it's different. There's no way you're going to look at Pollen and look at Samurai the Card Game and be upset at this new release. Sure, it's different, but it's 100% different. Except for the gameplay. I think that's the same. But the packaging, the look of it, clearly the publisher has done something different, and it's a different release. There's no way to get upset that a new version of this game with an entirely different look has come on the market. You have Pies, another all-play release, which is a new version of Matthias Kramer's Plums, a sort of trick-taking-ish game from mid-2010s. Pies is the same as Plums. The gameplay is exactly the same. There's only some wooden bits, I believe, from the crowdfunding campaign for Pies, just to dress it up a bit. Those aren't available for Plums. You could possibly buy those bits and use them in Plums. I don't know. I don't know if it's quite comparable, but of course, you could upgrade Plums yourself. Plums is still a wonderful game. You could upgrade it yourself if you want by going to a craft store and buying different elements. You have all that. It's not taking anything away from you or giving you something that you didn't have before to have these upgraded bits. At least I would think there would not be that expectation. The third category, that's where you start having some disgruntled reaction from people. As with Gloomhaven, you have a publisher that released a game, releasing a new edition of the game with changes. Can I get the changes? I bought the original. Can I have that? There was another recent case with Village. So Village is a game that came out in 2011 from Eggert Spiele. It's Marcus and Inca brand design. Won Kennerspiel des Jahres in Germany for Connoisseur's Game of the Year. Had a couple of expansions come out. They were sold separately. This was all with Dennis Lohausen art. And it was off the market for quite a while. And now Eggert Spiele has brought it back with brand new art, new graphic design, entirely new look. Okay, yeah, I can see they're trying to reach a different audience. I can understand that. But this also has a new expansion, a marriage expansion, not available elsewhere. It's got solo rules as well. Okay. It's got a different look to it. I have the original. Can I get the marriage expansion? Is Eggert Spiele going to make that available to me with Dennis Lohausen art so it matches my original release? And the answer is no, they are not. Now, of course, a publisher is not obligated to do anything along these lines. Cephalofair Games is perfectly well within its right to release a second edition of Gloomhaven and not make an upgrade kit. Eggert Spiele can release the marriage expansion in this big box and say, you want the marriage expansion? Here you go. This is what you can get. And you might be unhappy with that, might vow never to get it, and both of you are in the right. The publisher is trying to simplify things for itself, to not manage too much in its inventory, not do extra work for an unknown number of people who may or may not buy this thing. Eggert Spiele knows its sales numbers. It knows how many copies of Village are out in the market, how many of each expansion it sold. Those figures usually drop over time. Often it's like a tenth to a third of the people, from what I've heard, will buy an expansion compared to the base game. So you have Village has been off the market for a long time. How many people are looking for that marriage expansion in the original Dennis Lohausen art? Does that make sense for Eggert Spiele to release that to satisfy the desire of people to get a complete version of Village? Ignoring the fact that Village was complete already. Village was complete before. Village was complete with the base game. You don't need any of the expansions to play it. It's complete when you add one of the expansions. It's complete when you add both of the expansions. There's different levels of completeness to the game. If you want everything now, this is the only edition. This is the only thing you can do. It's also got some promo tiles that were released at conventions and whatnot. This is what you have. And the publisher is certainly within its rights to say, this is the product that we're selling. And I'm sorry you don't like it, but they want to simplify things for themselves and not have to have multiple production lines to make something else for an unknown quantity of sales. And we have to manage this. We got to have inventory for it. We got to track all this sort of stuff. Let's keep things simple. We're doing the big box. End of story. And you can certainly be upset about it. You can wish that you had this, and it is certainly your right to just say, I'm never buying from them again. They're also right, doing things their way. There's no obligation to do that. A publisher can certainly try to satisfy past demand. You can look at something like Big Boss, okay? This is a new edition of a game that first came out in 1994 from Cosmos, only in a German edition, and now it's coming out in English from Funko Games. They've changed some elements to the game, but they also include the original rules if you want to play that way. And that's mostly you play the original rules by stripping out some of the components and just changing things up a bit. It works. Sometimes it's very easy to do that, and sometimes it's a lot more involved, and it doesn't make sense from a manufacturing perspective, an inventory perspective, a distribution perspective, to go through the effort of doing that. I hear a lot of talk from people saying they feel like they've been ignored or their support is not appreciated, where I bought the first edition of the game. Why are you abandoning me? I supported you from the beginning, and now you're releasing something new and it's not available. You don't care. Why would I support you again in the future? I can sort of understand that perspective, but at the same time, I don't think the publisher is obligated to release something, because what they offered in the past was that game, and you got that game. So they delivered on what they promised. No future expectations of what you're going to get, unless they promise that within the sales contract. There's not usually a sales contract with you buying something from a publisher, but maybe there's something promised in the advertising, in the rule book, something like that. You will get future updates. We'll release a new rule set once a year. Some designers do such things. Usually there's nothing. Here's what we're offering. You want it? No, you can wait. You can wait and see if there will be a second edition. My dad did this. I got to experience this firsthand with my dad, who worked for IBM. So we had IBM computers growing up all through the 80s into the 90s. And he started talking about getting a new computer because the current one was outdated. And he'd research. And then a new version of a computer would be announced. And he's like, oh, okay, I got to wait for that one. And he researched. I'm not sure. New one was announced. And he did this for at least 5 years. It was kind of ridiculous, where he kept saying, I don't want to buy yet because I want the next thing that's coming. And then the next thing would be announced, and he'd say like, well, that sounds good. Let's just hold on for the future. And he denied himself the benefit of the updated thing for years. But apparently he was okay with that. You are not obligated to buy the first edition of a game if you think a second edition will be out. Maybe you play someone else's copy first. You wait a while. You see how reaction is over time. Maybe you want to play it multiple times and see whether you really want to invest that money. It all makes sense from a player's perspective to do that. But if you buy the first edition, that's what you get. I did that with the first edition of Innovation. It came out in 2010. I bought it, loved it. They came out with a second edition. I can't find my first edition right now in the house. I bought this. They'd updated some of the cards, changed it. I bought it again. I've bought multiple copies of the second edition because I've worn out the cards. I just got a backup copy. And then they came out with Innovation Deluxe, all right, which has the base game and 4 expansions in it. And I had bought 2 of those expansions separately. I then got Innovation Deluxe because I wanted new updated cards, all the expansions together. Asmati Games has now announced Innovation Ultimate, which has a new 5th expansion. And they've changed a lot of the cards. Now to go to Age 11. It's a civilization building game. You go cards from ages 1 to 10. Now it goes to 11. They've updated lots of cards. And I will buy it again because I love that game so much. It's my favorite game of all time. I have bought it many, many times, and I feel it's worth it to support the author and the publisher by telling them I love their work and I pay for it. So we have lots of varying ideas about what's appropriate. I don't think they owe me new cards. I don't think they owe me new expansions when they reissue it. I don't think they owe me the other ones. I understand that things change over time. You figure out how to do things better, or maybe you want to change what's happening. Time has passed. This innovation came out in 2010. So 13 years have passed. We're looking now in the future. We're adding a new age. So looking ahead, I believe, to 2050, age 11. There's lots of new things coming in there. So, of course, okay, if I want it, I'm going to pay for it. And I'm going to get it. That's just how things are going to be. Starts to get to be this dividing line where things are old enough that it feels like, no, you're definitely not under contract. You don't have an obligation, or you feel the publisher doesn't have an obligation to give you the new stuff or sell you the new stuff or make the new stuff downloadable if it's in that format. So Freedom and Frieza is publishing a second edition of Black Friday, a game that came out in 2010 from Cosmos, not his own company, 2F Spiele, but from Cosmos under the name Schwarzer Freitag, so Black Friday, 2010. And he's coming out with a second edition in 2023. I saw a comment from someone who was disappointed that if they wanted the second edition, they'd have to buy it again. That was 13 years ago. Like, yeah, it's a different publisher. It's the same designer, but it's a different publisher. It's not like Frieza is obligated, again, to publish a rule set. The rule set will probably be available online, but he's not obligated to publish components to make it available to people who have the first edition of the game. He could do that as a service, but what's the work involved with that when instead he could go work on another game? Is it worth it? And you get to a certain point and you're like, yeah, this is definitely old enough that no one who bought the first edition is ever going to say they deserve new, different stuff. This is the fourth category of things that we fall into. I had actually put Big Boss in that category. It's an updated version of the game. It's a new edition with changes. But again, the original was 1994. It's almost 30 years ago. So no one who owns Big Boss would probably say they need the stuff here to play this new modern version of Big Boss. I don't see that happening. There's a new edition, I gotta look at the name here I wrote down, Catan Sternfahrer das Duel, a 2-player version of Catan in space. It was released in English under the name Starship Catan. It came out in 2001. I'm pretty sure that no one with Starship Catan will feel the publisher owes them whatever is new to play this new version of the game, which will be revamped. It's It's already been announced. There's going to be some changes to it, which again makes sense because it's been 20 years. There's a new edition of Gru the Game coming out from Steve Jackson Games, not the original publisher. They're going to put the base game and the expansion all in one box. There's probably going to be some changes to it. What do they owe the original people who bought Gru? I'd argue nothing. There's, right down, I'm trying to think there was another thing. Forgetting the other thing now. I mentioned Kingmaker. Kingmaker came out in a new edition from UK publisher Gibson's Games. Does Gibson's owe anything to people who bought Kingmaker previously? No, they do not. There's changes to the board, changes to the rules, the artwork, all this. It's different. So I'm trying to see where that line is between where people feel comfortable, between the third case here, the updated version of a game, and just something that's super old and brought back on the market for the new time. How old is old enough that you don't think the publisher owes you a new version? Again, that frame is wrong. How old do you think it needs to be so the publisher is not required to make components available so that owners of the original game can play the updated version? For you, how old would that have to be? If you own Gloomhaven, do you think it's unreasonable for Cephalofair not to make an upgrade kit available, even though they have said it's essentially the game itself? There's another new version coming out. Acquire. Shipyard. That's another one. Shipyard is a game from 2009, and it was published originally by Rio Grande Games, and now the designer is bringing it out himself through Delicious Games, and they've got updated components. They've got some wooden bits that are going on. There's some other changes in there. Is he required? Should he make those components available to those who bought the original game? Should he feel obligated to do that to people who bought the original 14 years ago or anywhere in the meantime? Where's that dividing line? I mean, from my perspective, the publisher doesn't owe anyone anything. They may do it as a service. If you have solo rules that are added to a game, as with the release of the second edition or third printing of Carson City Big Box, is now added solo rules. I think that's the only change. And I'm pretty sure the publisher could just make the solo rules available as a PDF. And then anyone could use those who already has the game. That's something where it's clearly a tiny bit of effort for goodwill on the part of people who own it already, even though you don't sell them anything, don't earn any money from them. It's a good thing on your part. But beyond that, where's that limit? I don't know. I'm curious to see what you think. If you bring up other examples of games that have new editions and see what you feel is right for things coming out in a new way. So just curious. I don't know. I got my line where I essentially feel if I want a new edition, I should pay for it because the publisher has put in new work. They probably paid artists. They're paying licensing fee. They're doing all this sort of stuff. And I understand the publisher's perspective of it being easier to sell all this thing at one time. I research all areas of the market. And so I think I can view things from all these different perspectives, and I can see where the publisher is right, and I can see where the gamer is right and wanting that thing, even though personally I'm buying it again. So that's where my line comes down to. I'm going to buy it again if I want it. And if I don't want it, I got the first thing. So I'm good. I've got Acquire. I don't have to buy the new Renegade edition of Acquire to get whatever changes they might make. I don't know what changes they are, but I got Acquire and I'm already good. Where do you fall on this? Maybe you can give some examples. I'm just curious to see what other ones as well you're interested in, what new editions you're interested in, because there are so many hitting the market. it's kind of hard to imagine the potential customer base exist for all of these. Or maybe it's just new people because, sure, you may have heard of Big Boss, but whatever. It was never on your mind as something you could possibly play. And now it's on the market, so maybe it is. Anyway, that's a lot for me. You can give a comment, and I'm curious to see what people name. And where do you fall on that line of how old or different something has to be before you feel the publisher is off the hook? Let me know.